morning everyone, Lisa here with you today on the Crafty Meraki YouTube channel. Today I thought I would create a card using the Love Forever hot foil plate and the coordinating layering stencils. Now there is a stamp set, a Love Forever stamp set and a coordinating die, but I don't have those. So what I'm going to do today is hot foil the Love Forever plate, but using black foil, and that's going to give me the look of a stamped image, albeit with a little bit of shine. But it's a way of getting more use out of your hot foil plates and creating the look of a stamped image. So let's get started. So off camera I've gone ahead and foiled the plate, and today I'm actually using a specialty cardstock for my foiling. This is the Spellbinders specialty cardstock. It is a synthetic card, very much like Yupo, and it's kind of my go-to cardstock for when I'm having trouble foiling onto other surfaces. So I thought I would try it with the black foil today and see how that worked out, and by and large it did work out quite well. I did get some over foiling with the image, but I'm going to show you a couple of ways of how I sort that out. So when I talk about over foiling, I'm just talking about little bits of excess foil. It kind of looks as if your image is slightly blurred. Maybe if you'd stamped an image down and you'd pressed too hard and the outline wasn't quite as crisp as you wanted it to be. But that's what I mean when I talk about over foiling. So you can use a brush to remove off some of that excess, or you can also use a sand eraser. When you use the sand eraser, you do have to be quite careful. You can scratch the foiling. So I usually kind of test out a small area first just to see how that's looking. But with the black foil, it actually does pick up some of the colour of the foil, and that stays on your eraser. So you do need to be careful as you move around using it, because you may end up putting that black foil down in a place where you don't want to. And as I use that eraser, I do brush off any little flecks of foil as well, just to make sure I keep that panel as clean as possible. And I'm using quite a light hand. I didn't scratch the foil, but as I mentioned, you can do that, and you don't want to spoil your image. So I'm just turning that into the light now, and you can see quite how shiny that cardstock actually is, and that does cause a little bit of a problem later in the video, but I'll talk about that then. But for now we're going to move on to our stenciling, and that's how we're going to add all our colour onto the image today. Whenever I'm stenciling, I usually attach my cardstock to a sticky mat. These are the ones from My Sweet Petunia, so they are the Misty sticky mats. There's 3 in a pack, and you just remove the backing from it, and then you can stick your panel down onto that, and that's really helpful when you're doing layering stencils, so it doesn't move around and you just switch out the stencil each time. So just removing the stencils from their packaging. There are 5 in this set, and I will use all of them today. They are numbered and they do have grid lines on as well, which helps you to line them up. So just taking stencil number 1 and laying that down, it's really easy to line this up. The sticky mat does hold it a little bit, but as you can see, the stencil isn't that much bigger than my panel, so I do attach some tape as well to the stencil. The card panel itself is actually secure on the mat, but I do want to make sure that the stencil doesn't move. So I'm just applying my first colour here. So this is my lightest shade, and this is the soft lilac colour, and this is a set from All to New. So using a blending brush just to get the coverage really even throughout that stencil. And because this is a smooth cardstock, this goes on really, really easily. So it's very, very easy to blend the colours. And I'm just going to remove that stencil now and grab the next one in the set and place that down, taping it down as well to make sure that it doesn't move. And these stencils are very easy to line up. What I find quite helpful when I'm using layering stencils is to just take one part of the image, and on this one here I'm kind of looking at those flower clusters in the top left corner, and I'm lining my stencil up with those every time, or I use that as my starting point to line up the rest of the stencil, and that usually works really well for me. So moving in with my mid purple here, and this is Lavender Fields, and I'm also adding a light yellow on those flower clusters. So I'm actually using Warm Sunshine for my first layer on those clusters. That is also an All to New ink. So all of these will be linked in the description bar below. I am using layering inks for my stenciling today, but you don't have to. You could just look through your stash, pick out 3 different purples, 2 different yellows, and see how they work when you ink them up together. I do think that these sets of layering inks do take all the guesswork out though, and that's really helpful. So I'm just going in with my final darkest shade of purple here, and then I'm going to finish off the flower clusters with a slightly darker yellow, more of an orange. This third stencil is actually the final of the layers for the flowers, and we're going to move on to the leaves next, and there are just 2 layers for the leaves. For the leaves I switched to some Pinkfresh Studio inks, and I'm actually going to use 2 shades that are not directly sat together in the set of 4. So I actually use the 2nd and the 4th of the different colours. So my lightest one here is Grassy Knoll. So just applying that through, as I say, these blend so easily onto this cardstock. And then I'm going to finish with the 2nd layer, and that is the olive colour from that particular set. I really enjoy using layering stencils. I think they're such a great option if you're not a big colorist or you simply don't have a lot of time to colour an image. So that brings us to the end of the stenciling, and I went ahead and cut the image out. You can get a die for it, but I did decide to go ahead and cut it out. And I'm just taking my background panel now and working out where I want that floral image to sit against that background panel, and that is the Crafty Plaid A2 die. I've gone ahead and die cut that off camera just from some white cardstock, just so that you don't have to watch me poke out all those little sections. So just lining that up and trimming off the excess. You may remember that I mentioned earlier in the video that I had run into a little bit of a problem with the cardstock. It wasn't something that showed on the final card, but this cardstock is smooth, and therefore the inks that I blended onto it didn't saturate into the cardstock itself. They do sort of sit on top. Thankfully, I realised this quite quickly. I got some ink on my hands after I'd sort of done my first bit of cutting, And then I just made sure that as I cut the rest of the image out, I kept my fingers actually on the white part and not over the bit that I had blended. So it wasn't anything that actually shows. I did actually manage to trim off the bits where I had smudged the ink, but it's just something to be aware of. And of course that would only be a problem if you fussy cut. If you had the die itself, you wouldn't be handling the cardstock in the same way. So I'm just adding some adhesive to the back of that background panel, tapping off the excess before I bring it down to my base card and secure that down. So we're going to move on to our sentiment now, and off camera I did foil the Handmade Love foil plate again onto the synthetic Spellbinders specialty cardstock, again with black foil. And then I took the coordinating die and lined that up. It lines up really, really easily, and I ran that through my die cutting machine. This foil plate is so handy. I absolutely love that you can foil all those sentiments in one go and die cut them out all at the same time. Such a great time saver. And of course stamp sets that do a similar thing are also a good time saver too. So just popping out all of those little sentiments, and then I decide on which one I want to use, and I'm going to pop that up onto my panel with some foam tape. And that brings us to the end of the card for today. I have to say I like how this came together. I think it's really nice to see a black foiled image. I usually use gold, so I like the look of black a lot. Anyway, do give this a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, and I will be back next week with another card for you. But in the meantime, I hope that you have a wonderful weekend. Bye for now.